This is the Physical Activity Researcher Podcast, a podcast for researchers of sedentary behavior, physical activity, and sports. Join for a relaxed dialogue about research design, practicalities, and, well, anything related to research. Learn from your fellow researchers useful and relevant information that does not fit into formal content and limited space of scientific publications. And here is your host, researcher and entrepreneur, Olli Tikkanen.
Welcome everyone. Before introducing guest of today's episode, I would like to note just few things. Physical Activity Researcher Podcast is committed to promoting equality and diversity in all its activities, including selection of guests. We have limited resources to scout all great researchers from different groups of people. So if you know someone who should be as a guest in the podcast, please ask this individual to contact us directly. As another thing, I would like to ask for your help. Being able to deliver this podcast to you, my audience, is based on how many people start to listen and follow this podcast. So I would really appreciate little help promoting this podcast. You can do this by subscribing, following the podcast on Twitter, retweeting tweets sometimes, and maybe even giving a good rating if you liked an episode. And now it is time for the actual show and introduction of our great guest of today's episode. Welcome everyone. I'm very excited about the guest of today's episode. He has PhD in exercise physiology from Texas A&M University. He has been visiting professor at Chamberlain University in San Antonio. He has been doing consulting work through his Valkyria Wellness company, and he is currently working as Medical Science Liaison Internship at Atlas Medical. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce our guest, Dr. Blaise Collins. Welcome, Blaise.
Howdy, thanks for having me.
Howdy. So how is everything going in Texas?
It goes well here. We're prematurely, I think, about to lift some of the coronavirus restrictions, but otherwise it seems to be business as usual.
Yeah, and how are the restrictions of coronavirus at the moment in where you are staying?
So I'm in San Antonio. Most of the urban communities, be it San Antonio, Austin, Texas, Dallas, have been in a full lockdown where essentially you're supposed to just stay at home. Some of the grocery stores are open, but you're not supposed to leave aside from groceries, healthcare, or you're allowed to go exercise as well. The gyms have been closed down since mid-March, so I know most of my weight training is probably out the window at this point.
Yeah, so you used to go to the gym quite often, I guess.
Yes, sir. I shoot for 5 to 6 days a week, mostly powerlifting, bodybuilding type. But since the lockdown, I picked up my mountain bike and got it fixed back up to 15 miles now. So I definitely didn't see myself doing that a year ago.
Yeah, so some changes. So how do you see in more general, like the gyms are closed, strength training is important for many people, and for health it's important for all people. How do you see this situation, that this kind of some sort of lockdown or restrictions might continue for quite long? How do you see the situation?
Well, I mean, obviously, I have a unique perspective on it, but 2 weeks before the gyms closed, I hit 650 on deadlifts, which I was very stoked about. I'm very happy to hit that. And then the gyms close, and every week I know I'm losing around 10% of that max. So once I finally get back in there, I'm gonna be happy if I hit 3 plates on deads. But as far as the general population, those that might not competitively lift or might not exercise often, I have noticed just in the neighborhood probably a 5 or 6 fold increase in people out walking with their kids, jogging, bicycling. So even if the gyms are closed, it seems like more people are exercising. although it could just be at the people that were going to the gym just switched to going outside. So hard to tell.
Yeah, there's not much research out yet. How does it go? Do you think it will? We are in the beginning anyway, few months in this, and do you think it will stay like that, or do you see that people will change behavior, get bored of exercising, or how do you see it going?
I mean, anything I say will be speculation on that. I know here in Bexar County, which is San Antonio, there were there's a 15% increase from last week in COVID related deaths and around a 25% increase in actual cases. Uh, but for some reason, the state is still looking at opening in phases. So by the end of May, it's supposed to be completely open. But uh, given that we're still increasing cases by 25%, I feel like those restrictions are probably going to go back in place here in a month. As far as people exercising, I think if they've been doing it for a month and a half, they're probably seeing the beneficial changes and the bumps in energy that you would expect to see. So they're probably going to stick with it at this point, I would imagine, for the most part.
Hmm. There's quite a few things you can do now outside of your home, so I guess that's important for people. So, how do you see? You said that you were doing a lot of deadlift, and how do you see all the athletes and recreational athletes? How should they take this situation that from the kind of mental health point, or kind of that perspective, and also from the training perspective?
From the training perspective, it's really just a matter of being creative. I'd consider myself a recreational athlete. I've done work with like the Texas A&M football team in the past, and most of the bigger universities have the resources available to somehow promote continued training for their athletes. Bigger sports teams have access to the gym still, I would imagine. Whereas I would imagine the smaller universities probably don't have those same resources. So you will probably see a lot of injuries this upcoming sports season. As far as mental health, again, it's just staying creative. Like I said, my deadlift is probably in free fall. My squat is probably in free fall. But I just hit 15 miles on a mountain bike, and I'm finding new parts of our neighborhood even that I didn't know existed, including creeks and mountain biking trails and just random trails through the woods. So it's about finding the positivity in the situation and not focusing on just being stuck inside.
Mm. And how would you encourage you? You come from the weightlifting side. How would you advise normal people how to keep up their muscle mass, some of the muscle performance, even just for daily life requirements?
Uh, the main thing is doing something. So I know the joke right now is everybody is just staying at home playing video games, but even a gallon of water. So if you just have a gallon jug of water, that weighs 8 pounds. So if you were to tie a couple of those together, suddenly you could do curls with 8 pounds or 16 pounds or 24 pounds. Getting out and walking will help to maintain some of that mass. I'm lucky enough to have dumbbells in my office and a weight machine, total gym, and a punching bag, so I can still kind of do some of those. So really, it's just a matter of using what you have and trying to do body weight type activities and increasing how much activity you do. So if you're walking 4 miles an hour, go for 5 miles an hour or go an extra mile each week. There's always things you can do to progress with where you're at.
Mm. And how do you see the situation? I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but there's quite a bit of overweight problem in the south of US. How do you see for these people and their cardiovascular health if they become more sedentary during this time because you need to stay inside? How do you see the situation?
That is a huge, huge problem. And let's see, how long do you have? An hour? So sedentary lifestyle and poor diet combine to make the number one cause of death in the U.S. That includes bringing obesity into the mix, metabolic syndrome. Obesity is a huge problem in the US right now. And for some reason, what you typically see in the media is opioid addiction, any other number of health concerns, but they never bring up the obesity, which it's essentially an epidemic at this point. Um, Obesity is at 99% of the time, it is something that is controllable. It's not your genes, unless you're considering the pizza in the refrigerator, your genetics. It's typically a result of not exercising and eating very poorly. Now, in the United States, where if we have the choice between a hamburger or a salad, most people are going to ask for the hamburger, but to get pizza as the buns instead of just buns. So the Western diet in and of itself leads to obesity. Now that we have the coronavirus, where basically the government saying stay indoors, that's just an added excuse. So many people that were going to be sedentary either way, now they're going to continue being sedentary and probably more so. So obesity is a huge problem. Lack of activity is a huge problem. Poor diet's a huge problem. I don't think that we're doing enough to address those. I think there needs to be more public outreach to help give ideas for people to get out and be active.
And you mentioned that the obesity is not brought up in the media. Why is that?
Uh, I'm trying to think of the best way I can put it. It's it's not a sexy enough topic. I think that's probably the best way I could put it. It's not a topic that really excites people or is attractive to people. Um, Especially right now, we have the fat acceptance movements and body positivity, which are nice, but I feel like they do more harm than they do good. I mean, everybody should accept themselves, but that doesn't mean that you can't strive to improve on yourself. So uh, it doesn't get brought up in the media because I guess because people see it as offensive to bring up, even though it's leading to the number one cause of death in the U.S. So I don't really have a solid answer on that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Not an easy question. So the obesity is a big problem. Do you how should how should it be handled? How should it be brought up that there could be a positive change towards the better?
Uh, are you familiar? Trying to think. So Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think everyone on the planet knows him. Helped
Yeah.
to create the President's Fitness Council. I want to say early '90s or late '80s. And in that, kids had to go through, it was essentially standardized testing, sit ups, how fast can you run a mile, push ups, pull ups. Doing things like that are linked to lifetime physical activity. So starting as a child to exercise helps promote that later on in life. Uh, but right now we're seeing schools that are not bringing in the money that they should. Physical education is one of the first things that are cut. Even at colleges, if you're not in the kinesiology field, typically you're doing a quarter or less of the physical activity electives. And then there's nothing to promote wellness after school. So once you've graduated, your entire fitness, health, and wellness is solely on you. There's no real resource out there to promote you to get up and go. So I think a couple things we could do are promote more public outreach type activities. I know some good communities, ours is one of those, will have like the 5K fun runs and half marathons, things like that. Um, if some insurance companies actually have allowances and programs in place to reward physical activity, but we need to think of something, and I don't have the answer to that, but we need to think of something that we could improve outreach essentially.
Yeah, not an easy question and easy task. Do you think there's some concrete things that could be done at the moment, as we have this coronavirus and self-isolation going, is there anything, even small things, that we could do to help the health of overweight and obese people?
Well, I'm gonna plug Fibion here in a second for you. But for a few years now, we've had access to devices, whether it be in your phone, be a watch. Fibion has a device as well that you can stick in your pocket, but they track activity. And some insurance companies will actually link up to those and see that you're walking 10,000, 20,000 steps a day. And that then allows them to quantify how much activity you're doing. So a lot of the times, you can't change people. You can't change how people think. You can't change the actual person, but you can influence what they do. And people in general like games. So if you can give them devices to monitor their walking and set it up as a game, or where they can actually see graphically how well they're doing, I, that has shown success in the past. So something along those lines, or we could do social distancing yoga walking down the street.
Yeah, yeah, challenging things.
This podcast is sponsored by Fibion, a research device that has been shown to be valid in tracking sitting, standing, physical activity and energy expenditure. Furthermore, Fibion has been shown to be valid categorizing physical activity into light, moderate and vigorous intensity. In addition to scientific accuracy, Fibion provides automatically produced and easy-to-understand reports for research participants. Get scientific validation and learn more about Fibion at fibion.com/research. Fibion, from researchers to researchers.
So you mentioned that you're interested about nutrition. What kind of things you find the most interesting in the nutrition science at the moment?
Misinformation would probably be the big one. The the diets that are popular change based on what year it is, rather than what the science says. I was lucky enough to So I was at two labs at A&M. The second lab I worked with was more the human side. First lab was more the mice side. But that second lab, the lab director, Dr. Richard Kreider, was one of the founding members of the International Society of Sports Nutrition. And if anybody wants to check out their link, it's issn.org. But there is a wealth of information on there for nutrition. And the primary thing is not whether you're doing keto or whether you're doing high carb or whether you're doing some apple cider balsamic vinaigrette cleanse or whatever. What really matters is how much protein you're getting. So just nutrition, not even considering ergogenic aids like creatine and caffeine, just protein. Protein is the most important thing. They found no difference between high fat and high carb as long as protein was normalized between the two. There's multiple position stands on that. Now, ergogenic aids, pick your poison, and I could probably go way too in detail on it.
Yeah. So could you tell more about protein first? Like, what are the positive effects? How much do you see that people should get it? How is it different between different groups of people?
So protein, there's the common misconception that protein is protein, meaning what kind of protein you take doesn't matter as long as you're getting the protein. So you have soy protein, you have whey protein, you have casein protein. All of those are going to add to the amino acid pool within the body. So what that is the proteins are broken down. You have amino acid pool that's within the body that are then used to guide protein synthesis, which would mean increasing muscle mass or repairing tissues, or altering cellular functions throughout the body. So one of the things, like take veganism as an example, where your sole source of protein is soy protein, that could have estrogenic effects. There's been some literature showing that, but it has to be your sole source for that to occur. Whereas the general population, as long as they're getting their 1 to 2 grams per pound, they're going to see positive effects such as increased energy levels, decreased hunger, decreased chance of illness, increased muscle mass. There's a lot of different things that go along with it. It's You could go on and on and on just on protein alone.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. So how do you see? I think there's a bigger trend in many countries, probably globally, to eat less meat and get more of the protein from vegetarian sources. How people should eat when they do this, and what kind of things need to be considered?
Well, I'm a meatitarian. It's a life choice. It's a hard one, but um, I don't have any issue with vegan diets. I think if done right, they are just as effective as an animal-based diet. The problem is you have any number of celebrities and Instagram quote unquote influencers that will give their opinion on it, but pass it off as expert advice or authoritative direction. So the main thing is, especially when starting a new diet, first you need to consult with your physician. In many cases, that's a CYA type thing there. But also do your research on it. So you don't want to just jump into a diet because you saw it on Facebook. You don't want to jump into anything. You want to slowly ease into it. That avoids the shock to the system. I'm sure I know you've probably heard of keto and Atkins. Who hasn't, right? But when you start cutting carbs out like that, it leads to what's called the keto fog, where your brain, you just feel like everything's slow. You can't really think straight. Your energy levels are down. As far as a vegan diet, if you suddenly cut out animal proteins, you're gonna have to get used to digesting plant proteins, which our bodies are not as efficient at as, say, a mouse or a ruminant like a sheep. So again, it's a matter of slowly easing into it, doing your research on what foods you need and what foods are just taste good that you can add, and then keep listening to your body is the big one. So if your body's acting sick, then you probably need to change something.
And when you say that the digestion needs to get used to it, do you usually get stomach problems, or is it just that you cannot absorb all the protein, or what kind of things you can expect?
As far as not absorbing it, there are differing schools of thought on that one. I've seen some say that 25 grams is the most. Some say at 50. Most the protein that's not immediately digested typically goes amino acid pool or is excreted in the urine, as you'll see like a net or a net positive or net negative nitrogen balance, which will be indicative of the um, body's protein synthesis. Uh, so, as far as plants, you have to eat different types of plants most times to get the essential amino acids as opposed to an animal protein. So let's say I eat steak or eat chicken, you're getting complete proteins that have all the essential amino acids, whereas a plant, so I'm not an expert on vegan diet, but I think soy and maybe one other are the uh, only two proteins in plants that are complete proteins, whereas others you have to eat varieties of plants to get all those essential amino acids in.
Mm. And how do you see like the individual amino acids? Is there benefit or harmful effects eating them individually as supplements?
So supplements are called supplements because, well, it's in the name. So they're meant to supplement your diet. There's a big trend right now for branched chain amino acids, BCAAs. They're purported to increase athletic performance and all. Uh, I don't know if you've seen the literature or not, but they don't. So they do actually improve on recovery, but some of the benefits that they're touting are taking BCAAs will help to improve your energy levels, improve athletic performance, and increase your 1RM, when the reality is they just decrease your recovery time. Now, there are other amino acids that people like to look at. The one that comes to mind first would be L-leucine, which has been shown in elderly patients and otherwise healthy to improve protein synthesis and improve muscle mass. It has some evidence in younger, otherwise healthy athletes and recreational lifters, but I don't think it's compelling at this point. There's also methionine, which can help with antioxidation, but again, it's not enough information to uh, make a conclusive remark on.
Hmm. And you said that with leucine, there's some effects for elderly and some normal people. Would you recommend eating it as a supplement for any group of people?
I mean, really, you can get it just from proper diet. That's one of the things that I don't think gets it doesn't get enough attention. But the essential amino acids, if you're a animal based diet, or if you have been doing the vegan or vegetarian diets and know which foods to eat, you get all the amino acids you need from those. Typically, again, you want to shoot for the gram to 2 grams of protein a day per pound of body weight. But you're going to probably get the right amount just from diet alone. The supplements, they're not regulated. So anybody can put whatever they want in these, and there's no regulation. So you don't even know if it's exactly what they're saying. The proprietary blend that you see on all these supplements is just their own, whatever they decided to put in. I've heard of sawdust being put in stuff. So as far as individual amino acids, I don't see a big point to it.
Hmm. And and you said before we started talking about protein that there's no difference usually in the scientific studies between low fat and low carb diet. So so what do you see as the key things in the nutrition for normal people?
The big thing is eat healthy. I think most of us know that if you're offered a salad or you're offered a hamburger, probably take the salad with, well, in my case, take the salad with some shrimp or chicken or steak cut up on it. But we know that there's a difference between healthy food and unhealthy food. And I think a big part of what causes most people to fall off the whatever diet they jump on, or cause people to sink into eating bad food, is they overthink it. Like, think of the New Year's resolution. Everybody decides that they're going to eat healthier this year. By February, they've given up on that. So the best advice I can give is, instead of counting every calorie you eat until full, call it good, but make healthy choices. So eat a salad till you're full. Don't eat hamburgers and then gorge yourself past that. As long as you're getting the protein in, and as long as you're getting the protein in, you should be fine.
Yeah, I fully agree with the really stick with the basics.
This podcast is sponsored by Fibion. Fibion is an accurate sitting and physical activity tracking device and analysis platform. It is a great tool for projects that aim for behavior change in sedentary behavior and incidental physical activity. Fibion provides easy-to-understand PDF and web browser reports for participants. Other features include comparisons to recommendations, linking results to health risks, achievement cards, and interactive goal-setting tool. In addition, Fibion provides an API that allows for easy integration to other systems and applications. Learn more about Fibion at fibion.com/research. Fibion, from researchers to researchers.
And if we go to the ergogenic aids, and we started the discussion that you woke up this morning and you didn't have the caffeine in the fridge. How are your ergogenic aids? What do you think of them?
So, ergogenic aids are a fun conversation that can really be split into the 3 or 4 that actually work and the 2,500 that don't but are marketed as such. I do need to correct something I said earlier. I said the ISSN website is issn.org. It's actually sportsnutritionsociety.org. But they do have position stands that are freely available for anyone to look at. So my dissertation was actually it was on caffeine. So we were looking at a ready to drink pre-workout. I won't talk about the company, but the primary ingredient was caffeine. So I became an expert on caffeine. But if you look at today's market, what are the 3 first ones that come to mind?
Sorry, can you say that again?
If you look at today's market, what are the 3 ergogenic aids that come to mind first?
I'm not sure. Caffeine, creatine, and what would be the third? Yeah, I'm not sure.
So those are 2 of the main ones, and then beta alanine, and then also all the individual amino acids. So caffeine. Actually, I'm gonna come back to caffeine here in a second. Creatine, you need 3 to 5 grams a day of creatine, and it has to load. Now, depending on which study you read, there needs to be a 20 gram a day for a week loading phase, or you just do 3 to 5 grams every day forever. There's been no recent evidence to actually cycle on and off of creatine, so you can just keep taking it and taking it and taking it. What is not true is if I take creatine right now, the workout I do in 30 minutes will not get any benefit from that creatine. So creatine is not a pre-workout. It's something that you need to address in your diet, which anybody that eats red meat actually doesn't need to take extra creatine, but I digress. Beta alanine, similar to creatine, you need 4 to 6 grams a day, and it takes 3 to 4 weeks before you actually see a benefit from it. And beta alanine just allows you to do extra by regulating the muscle pH. So, when you're lifting heavy or running a lot, your muscles start to burn. That's due mostly to pH, but also, cytokines and CNS transmitters. Caffeine, on the other hand, as you exercise, there is a protein called adenosine that builds up, and that's what makes you feel tired. What caffeine does is block that. So while beta alanine and creatine require a long loading phase to have any effect on your workouts, caffeine, if you take it immediately before exercising, will increase the effectiveness of the exercise and also make it seem easier. So they've looked at studies using like the Borg RPE rating of perceived exertion and seen that at the same intensity, the caffeine group would report a lower perceived exertion. And typically you want, I think 300 milligrams is kind of the average dose, but you can do up to 5 grams per kilogram and still be safe.
Yeah, it's interesting. And how do you have you seen the new study? So I don't know how new they are, but there's a different people are metabolizing caffeine with the different speed, and then the ones who are metabolizing it fast will get the bigger benefit. I think I read. Have you read these studies?
I'd have to go back and look at it. Since you bring up the different formulations too, that does remind me. So as far as creatine monohydrate, it has been shown time and time and time again to have the most significant effects, and it's also the cheapest. But we keep seeing new creatines put out that, like ethyl ester, hydrochloride, you name it, that have no improved effect, but they can then market it as a new word and sell it for more. Also, creatine, if left suspended in water for more than like 12 hours or so, becomes creatinine. So it's completely useless at that point. So some of the caffeinated beverages being sold right now or marketed as creatine supplements, the creatine in it is inert by the time you drink it, so it's not actually a creatine supplement. Uh, as far as what you asked on the caffeine, I haven't read those. I haven't seen those studies, but I can say that caffeine from a pre-workout or from an energy drink versus caffeine from coffee do have different effects. Some of the studies I came across during my dissertation showed that the coffee group actually did not experience the same improvements as the caffeine only group. Um, the authors suggested it might be something to do with the enzymes in the coffee may alter the function. I don't know past that. So
All right, that's really interesting that it could be better the caffeine in the energy drink than in the coffee because I really like coffee, so that's my
yeah.
source most of the time. Yeah, I asked about the slow and fast metabolizing because I'm surely a slow metabolizer, so I like to drink coffee, but I need to be really careful because it's really easily affecting my sleep,
Oh
and
yeah.
I need to kind of come down from my caffeine intake when I start to feel the effects, and then it kind of slowly creeps up again, and then I need to cut down. But I can really like see the effects in the training that it's especially after working the day and you want to do a good training. I think it's really good way. And how do you see caffeine, creatine, and beta alanine? They are effective. Would you recommend them for the normal people and who?
Typically, yes. Creatine hasn't really been associated with any side effects. There has been some saying that water retention, which isn't really inherently dangerous, um, but creatine itself has not been associated with negative side effects. Beta alanine is also safe and effective. The only downside with that is if you take the entire 4 to 6 gram dose at the same time, you undergo what's called paresthesia, where your skin starts to tingle a lot. Uh, and then caffeine, the ergogenic range is 3 to 5 milligrams per kilogram. You can go up to 9 safely, but there's no added benefit. So that's typically 300 to 500 milligrams. The lethal dose is from 5 to 10 grams. So as long as you're staying under a gram, you're gonna be safe. But all three of those do have evidenced effects on exercise. Now, there's a lot that don't. Like you see niacin in most workout supplements. This is from industry professionals, but niacin is literally put in those supplements so that you feel it quote unquote kick in because the niacin causes the skin tingles just like the beta alanine does. Uh, and then all the BCAs, as we covered earlier, those don't add to your workout; they just help with recovery. Uh, so there's just entirely too many supplements out there, and all of them purport to be the best one.
And you mentioned the other additions in the energy drink. Is there something you should avoid, and is there something that's really beneficial?
Processed sugar is typically a good one to avoid, but the trade-off there is if you're drinking multiple energy drinks in a day, you're trading off the processed sugar for aspartame and sucralose and all these other artificial sweeteners, which have been they've been linked to various health issues. Um, but it's all things in moderation is the big thing. I haven't really come across much in the various energy drinks and protein bars and all that just screams out to me as being something bad aside from processed sugar.
Mm. And as you have been studying the caffeine, is there have you seen any like kind of long-term effects when you use it? Addiction? Is there any downsides using caffeine than the other than it might disturb your sleep?
Headaches. So during doctoral studies, I know I was drinking a lot of caffeine at that point. I think most of us probably were. During my postdoc, we had a couple studies going on, but I was staying up late most nights trying to figure out how to get this tourniquet system to work in pigs. And I know caffeine intake went up, but there were a couple times where I tried to just quit the caffeine, and it was like headaches for days. I get migraines on occasion, anyways, but trying to quit drinking caffeine led to almost migraine-like after effects. But those are just typical withdrawal symptoms. I didn't notice any change in sleep really. Just I'd have a headache and I was more irritable.
Mm. And yeah, you mentioned the artificial sweeteners. I haven't read too well the literature. I have just sometimes skimmed a little bit in PubMed. And I I think most often I think that they are kind of exaggerated in the popular readings, that what are the effects. What is your take on how bad they are, or are they bad?
I'm not actually an expert on those, but what I do know, um, a lot of them will cause like an artificial insulin spike, like phenylalanine is one of those. So you end up with this spike in your storage hormone. So even though you're not actually putting extra sugar in there, you might be storing extra stuff that you've recently. Uh, but I'm not actually an expert on the sweeteners, so I can't talk too much on those.
Yeah.
I've heard them linked
And
to things like Alzheimer's and stuff, but I don't know the literature well enough on there to authoritatively say.
yeah. And when you send things that you are expert and interested in, one was exercise is medicine. Could you tell more about your take on exercise is medicine?
So, kind of how we started the conversation was like we have the coronavirus right now, and people are having to think of new ways to exercise. One good thing that's come out of it is I know I'm one of these people that I would stay inside all day working at the computer, whether it be developing studies or talking to colleagues or whatever. I was inside, and that'd be outside for about 20 seconds to walk to the car, and then I was inside at the gym, and then inside at home. One of the good things from the coronavirus is now people are getting outside and walking, which sunlight, being outside, have been linked to higher mental health. Onto the exercises medicine, exercising just by itself, not even bringing in the outdoors or indoors components. It helps to improve energy levels, increase your mental state, helps with cognitive function, um, helps with libido, sleep quality, your self confidence. So it helps with a ton of things, but it also helps to increase your immunity. So I'm sure you saw about the Navy ship where probably around 90% of the sailors tested positive for coronavirus, but there were only a handful that were actually symptomatic. And last I checked, that's still the same. Now look at their lifestyle as opposed to the remaining population that's been diagnosed with COVID and those that have died. And most of the ones that have become critical or died, they don't really exercise much. And that goes for most illnesses. As long as you exercise, you improve your immune response. You improve your immune response, you decrease your risk of getting sick. And in many cases, you can actually reverse being sick with exercise.
Yeah, I fully agree.
This podcast is sponsored by Fibion.
My name is Dr. Paul Batman, and I'd like to just say a few words about Fibion. I've used it a number of times on different projects that I've been involved in and find that it's incredibly reliable, very valid, and incredibly sturdy. I love the graphics that come with it. It really is very clear and could easily see the active and inactive periods as well. So I'd certainly recommend Fibion to anyone that's interested in finding out more about sedentary behaviour, particularly the concept of sitting and how we can possibly break it up with some really good, valid information.
Fibion. From researchers to researchers.
How do you find the kind of the phrase exercise is medicine? Is it good phrase for normal people to get the exercise labeled as a medicine, because it kind of makes it very clinical and something it doesn't sound too much of fun or something. Do you think it should be kind of in the scientific and medical discussion that exercise is medicine, but how should we get it to people?
See, in short, yes. So, what got me into healthcare? I started working at a cardiac rehab as an exercise physiologist. And I mean, there were quite a few patients that were actually able to come off of their diabetes meds or like drastically reduce them after going through cardiac rehab and pulmonary rehab. Uh, the I started getting heavily involved in the American College of Sports Medicine, so the ACSM, which is kind of our governing body on exercise, and they're actually the ones that coined the term exercise is medicine. But I started getting involved with them and really keeping up to date on the literature coming out of the ACSM and in conversations with physicians that led to drastic increases in patient referrals. I think it was around double the first year. But it also led to getting invited to give lectures within the community. So gave quite a few lectures for diabetes support groups throughout my hometown of Odessa. So just that part did improve awareness, but that is a good point you make on exercise as medicine, and most people don't want to take extra medicine. So uh, I think ACSM's done very, very well with getting exercise awareness out there, especially to the medical and scientific communities. As far as getting it to the community, that's going to have to be something that's more of a community led type thing. So you'd have to have a mayor that wants to start putting out initiatives to get people out and walk, stuff like that. People like to be around other people. So the more you can do to promote people exercising together, I think would be kind of the way to go.
Mm. And you mentioned that you worked with in cardiac rehabilitation. What did you learn doing that job?
That's where I really developed my love for research. When I first started there, I just finished my bachelor's and just started my master's. So with the master's, I'd started doing research, but with the cardiac rehab, I started doing research that wasn't for a grade. So I just enjoyed going out and bringing in new information. Uh, so through cardiac rehab, I learned how to write effective educational materials, how to effectively interact with physicians and internal and external stakeholders to the hospital, but also how to take those information and make them so that the patients could understand. But then started developing those educational materials led me to getting more involved in actual organizations. Like I was a chair for the American Heart Walk 1 year. And then just on a whim, I applied to A&M, and that the rest is history. Went off and started working on the exercise genetics and then exercise adaptation and then the postdoc here in San Antonio.
Yeah, and now you're working as a medical science liaison. Could you tell about more? I don't really know what is in the job description.
The medical science liaison, the MSL, it's kind of a hidden gem of science. So scientists can either go into academia and teach or be at the lab and research. Those are typically what people think of when they think of the term scientist or professor. Uh, I love research. I love talking about science. I love planning science. I love everything to do with science except for begging for money. So my idea could be as good as yours, but whoever's giving the money might they might have already been biased towards giving you money or giving someone else money. You get the idea. It's almost like a shark fight. With the MSL role, essentially what you're doing is you're developing educational materials, which I think I touched on that a second ago. You're interacting with physicians, which I've done that in the past as well. But the key goal is to have peer-to-peer conversations with the physicians, so you get insights on what their patients need, but you can also tell them what the studies are showing about your affiliated drug. So, doing the internship with Atlas Medical, we're doing orthopedic medical devices and therapeutics, adjuvant treatments. Um, and basically, what that is I'm reaching out to uh, orthopedic surgeons and primarily spines, and I'll give them what the data show on our products, and it's separate from cells. With the MSL, we can talk about off-label, plan new studies. With cells, they're talking about money. They're not allowed to talk about off-label stuff. So the MSL is essentially we educate physicians and then we learn from physicians to help guide research.
And it sounds like you like the job quite a bit.
Yes, sir. I love science. And with this role, I can talk about science and talk about data without having to beg people for money, which is nice.
Yeah, sounds good. And who would you see that is a good fit for MSL work, and who should stay as a researcher and beg for the money? Where do you see the line in types
uh,
of people?
I don't think there is a line. So, like, I'm an INTJ. I'm I'm primarily introverted. I hit the scientist, like, the bookworm, aside from the gym stuff. But really, it's just a matter of where your passion's at. My passion is talking about science and science communication. I do love research. I love planning it, love eh, analyzing and everything involved with it. But I also like to, I want to teach people. And oftentimes in the lab, you lose contact with people because you're typically in there with one or two other people, and you kind of end up with your own little microcosm. So even though I'm introverted, I do like to get out and interact with other people because that's the only way for me to mentally grow, is to take in other people's thoughts and opinions and ideas and integrate those so that I can be a better scientist.
Yeah, all very interesting. And before the discussion, you mentioned that you also like debunking the myths. What's your top one debunking?
Oh, the altitude training mask.
Please go on.
Uh, I mean, everybody, if faced with the option of making training gains and doing better with your training or spending $80 to go backwards, not very many people are going to go with option B. The thing with those is, so in exercise physiology, there's the live high, train low. So if you live high, you make those adaptations to carry more oxygen and increase your recovery, increase muscle mass, all those things that come along with higher altitude. Then you come low to train and you get better training efficiency. So somebody watched Batman entirely too many times and made a mask that restricts breathing. I think the first time I saw it was like one of those UFC shows. But this
Yeah.
mask is supposed to reduce or to restrict breathing, which the concept is that it's supposed to mimic altitude training. In reality, you're just able to take in less oxygen, which means your training efficiency goes down. So you might feel like you're doing the same amount as the person next to you, but in reality, you're doing much less. Oxygen is only a limiting factor in highly elite athletes. It's not a factor in recreational or even collegiate or professional. Only in elite. So you're not doing anything with the oxygen there with the mask. You're not strengthening up your lung tissue or anything like that. Your oxygen carrying capacity is going to remain the same either way. So essentially, you're spending $80 to train harder to get less. Is kind of where it comes down to.
Yeah, that's a great summary. I think it's maybe a good indication how you can market almost anything. I guess
Oh
they
yeah.
are selling it quite well. Let's take another one. What's your top two debunking?
Um, so I know CrossFit gets a lot of hate. I don't mind it. Do y'all, is there CrossFit in Finland?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I know it's kind of become like probably a global phenomenon. So it initially started off kind of as Navy SEALs training, uh, but it led to the term functional training, which again that term drives me up the wall. Deadlifts aren't really considered functional, but anything that's building up your muscle is functional. It's going to improve your joint health. It's going to improve your balance. It's going to improve everything. Um, so the term going through, whether it be CrossFit or the high intensity interval training or group exercise, all these different programs right now that revolve around functional fitness, that's their whole marketing is it's functional. Whereas if you just teach people the basics, you don't need complicated movements where you're kipping and doing handstand push-ups on the wall. You can use a dumbbell and get more adaptation, but safer. There's no need to add all those extra. They're not bad if done right, but for somebody just starting to exercise or just getting into it, those aren't good programs to start people on.
Yeah, I fully agree. I had a recording with Kieran Fairman, who's exercise oncologist,
Oh,
and his opinion was that the best movement for cancer patients is deadlift.
mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Deadlift and squat. With the Valkyria Wellness, which you probably appreciate the name being from Finland. So it's
Mm.
I'm big on my Norse ancestry and all that, so that's where I came up with Valkyria Wellness. But sorry, so yeah, squat and deadlift are always the first thing I start people on. The first workout I put people on, regardless of age or sex or medical history obviously does matter, but uh, is squats. So probably my biggest success story back in cardiac rehab. This lady came in. She was like early 90s, was on a walker, could walk maybe 10 to 15 feet at a time before having to sit on the walker. So the first day in there, she did 10, she did 10 sets of 10 squats. But so the way I did it was had her sit in a chair, asked her to stand up. It's like, could you do it again? So that was the first set of 10. And then 9 sets later, she was done. So that was her entire workout for the day. It was essentially German volume training with body weight. So she was sore, obviously, but and she hated me for the first couple of weeks. But by the time that 12-week program was done, she was walking 3 miles a day without a walker. So I'd like to start with squats and deadlifts because they develop the legs, they develop the lower back, and oftentimes they completely get rid of knee and lower back pain and hip pain. So doing those, if it doesn't hurt to walk, you're more likely to get up and walk. So with cancer patients as well, um, you're getting more bang for your buck from each movement if you're doing deadlifts and squats. Because with cancer, you'll exercise for a week or two, but then chemo is going to knock you down for a week or two. So you want to get as much as you can in those couple weeks before you're back on your back trying to recover.
Yeah, yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah, we've been discussing about 1 hour. Is there anything else you would like to add to these discussions?
I can't think of anything right now. Um, I did try to learn some Finnish. Uh, I saw this one and it was just very random, so I had to try to figure out how to say it. But Ilmatin Yala Kusini on Taina Ankariata. It's my hovercraft is full of eels. I'm sorry, I saw that and it was hilarious to me. This is completely
Yeah,
random. Uh,
yeah, that's good that you learning Finnish. It's very useful language. Almost nobody is talking it in the world. Yeah. So what would be your final remarks for this podcast?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me on. That was Haska Tabata. It was nice to meet you. Um,
Yeah.
See, I even learned some Finnish in the process, uh, or Suomi. I'm sorry. Thank you for having me on. It was very nice talking. I would strongly suggest right now it's an unprecedented moment in our history. Across the world, people are stuck inside their homes. The mental health decline is definitely quantifiable. So the best thing you can do is get out and at the very least walk. Um, get out, walk around the block. Uh, as long as you stay 6 feet away from people, you're well within the law. But also don't worry so much. So we have, if you're worried that you are sick, then probably stay inside, do body weight exercise. But if you feel fine, just go out, walk, jog, bicycle, do body weight exercises. There are a number of things you can do that can help increase your fitness throughout this, so you actually come out a stronger person on the other end.
Yeah, I agree. It was a pleasure to have you, Blaise. Thank you for taking the time for this podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us this week on Physical Activity Researcher Podcast. If you like the show, make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing or following the show on Twitter. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. If you found value in the show, we would really appreciate a rating on Apple Podcast or whichever app you're using. Or if you would, in a real old school way, simply tell a friend about the show. It would be a great help for us. We have a fantastic lineup of guests for forthcoming episodes, so be sure to tune in. Thank you all for your support and have a great day.